Hello, welcome to the March 11th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and make sure everything is coming through as expected. Bear with me just for a second. Okay, so audio is coming through my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. I work as a product specialist for Yamaha Corporation of America in the United States, which is the Steinberg distributor. And I'm based in outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you're watching the live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is we can submit questions in advance by emailing to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or we could just ask the questions in the chat field. So we could do that. And we'll try to get through each of the questions chronologically, as succinctly and completely as possible. So if your question isn't immediately asked, as there's already probably 50 questions posted, I will try to get through it in order. So if we could try to avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that just kind of slows things down. I'd appreciate that. Several hours after the live stream, I'll go through and watch the live stream, and I'll type an index of all the topics covered with timestamps, so you could jump back and forth. But if you wanted to search for particular topics that have been covered in previous live streams, it is going to be, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm is kind enough to do that. I want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude and Agent K, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do this out of the kindness of the heart to make it a better community experience for everyone on the live streams. And also give special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful collection of different resources, tutorials, and different files that are relevant for Cubase users. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so we see, is there a way to copy? So the first question, is there a way to copy volume automation of one track to another using the Project Logical editor? So I don't think that we could, let's see if we can, I'm inclined to say no. So let me just duplicate this particular part. So let's say if I have automation going on here. Okay. So let's take a look at the Project Logical editor. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take this track, and what I want to do is we'll insert, and we're going to say container type equals track, and I will make this property is set to, I'll do to the event the track is selected, and I want to insert another property, and we'll say property is set to parent object is selected. All right, so let's say if we want to, or let me just take a different approach with this. So we'll say media type is equal to automation. So let's say if these two tracks are like on top of each other. So let's see if we could do this maybe with the post process. So we're going to select the automation on the particular track. So let's say we're going to do it on selected track. So we'll say property, and we'll just say property set to event is selected. Okay, so if we do this now, we can select all of the automation. Okay, let me just... Let's set this to property set to parent object is selected. Okay, all right, so now what I want to do, so if I have the automation lanes open, we'll do a post process. So I will we'll say copy. And then let's navigate. And this is in Cubase 12 that gives you like 4 different post processes. So we'll just say down. And let me just see if I have that selected. Okay, so I'm going to go down twice and then paste. Okay. Okay, so let's see if this works. I have this. So it looks like that just, okay, so I'm going to paste at origin for that. So remove this and let's paste that automation at origin. Okay, so let's say I have this track selected here. So yeah, you could do it just like that and then enable automation. So that way we could copy the particular track. So what we did, I just chose to select the particular automation track. And then we said property is set to parent object is selected. So we have the automation track open. And then and we could do this in Cubase 12. So if you haven't updated, this is a great reason. You can see that we're going to copy that selected automation, navigate down twice, and then we could edit, paste at, and then also edit, paste at origin. We could actually create a macro for this if you wanted. And then it could automatically just, turn on the particular, have it read automation once you're done. But once again, we'll just come over here. Let's say I want to take this automation on this track. I just say apply. And now that automation has been copied from this track to another track. So great use of the new functionality in the Project Logical Editor extensions found in Cubase 12. All right, so we see David Griffiths from Wales in the UK and Robin Freeman from the Netherlands. Robin has 2 questions. Says, 1, I want to be able to increase the size of a marker track or zoom in on it in some way. My cues are all tiny. So, if you have marker tracks here, let's see. So I think that the font is going to be fixed. But if you wanted to navigate easier, if you hit, I believe it's just Control M. So what a lot of people end up doing is just kind of navigating their markers like this. And here we could have, the description for the particular marker as well. So if you wanted to just name the different markers. So just name it some gibberish. So the marker size isn't going to, the font size is fixed, I believe. But if you wanted to see it bigger, you could look at it here if you have like lots of different markers just by opening up the marker window. But I'll kind of pass that along as a potential feature suggestion as well. All right, and second question, group channel to selected channels. Create outside folder, adds group below selected channels in the project window and to the right in the mixer. But I always want the group above the channels to the left in the mixer. Could we have a preference so we can choose? I'll pass that along, but generally, most of the time when people are adding, let's say, group channels, when we go to our mix console here, that the group channel conceptually is, so as soon as we go to our mix console and I add a group channel to the selected channel, most people conceptually want the signal flow to go kind of from left to right. I'll pass it along as a feature suggestion, but currently it's going to be kind of set to the right because that's how the audio is kind of passing in the particular signal flow. You could always move the group channel manually. So if you wanted to, and you could create, if you wanted to, you could probably do macros to kind of move the group channel, but if you manually move it, you could have it there. But generally things will kind of go from left to right as kind of like a signal flow diagram to kind of match. So that's why it kind of defaults to the right, but I'll pass on the request regardless. All right, so we have Luca checking in, and he says he's in a finally sunny Munich. Okay, so we have a question from Desmond. Still using Cubase 11 on PC. Can I record MIDI for multiple instruments at the same time? Like when I'm playing piano and I also want to record the keys pad track at the same time. So yeah, all you have to do is, just select both tracks. So let's say, okay, I have a Rhodes patch here. Just check my audio connections. Okay, so now, so if I select a Rhodes patch, all I have to do, so if both of these are selected, we can, so one is monophonic, the synth bass is monophonic. So you can record on both those tracks, and if you wanted to, you could go to the input transformer on version 11. It'll be here. So if you wanted to do a split where the bass is only going to be on particular particular ranges, we can come over here and open the panel and say, I want to take notes. We'll say type is equal to note, and I want to say value 1, which is the pitch, we'll say is less than, let's say C3. And then what we want to do is to filter those notes on my synth bass. So anything that's going to be, well, let's say even bigger than C3. So now as I would play, I hear Rhodes notes. Then when I get to C3, so, and conversely, I could say on the Rhodes, I only want this particular logic input transformer. And let's go ahead and open the panel. And we can do kind of the opposite. So I could say we want to filter, and we'll say notes, and our value 1, we want it to be less than C3. And you could have overlap, obviously, between the two. So now as we would play notes, and when it gets to C3, and below that, it would now just play the bass. So if you need to set up splits, we could do that. But if you want to record on 2 different tracks, just record and enable 2 tracks in the same MIDI controller. Will probably be defined in all MIDI inputs, and then you have the ability to, record multiple tracks simultaneously quite easily. So we see question. Hi, Greg. Can you provide some information when is Nuendo 12 will be released? So, I would say it's not far behind Cubase 12, but I can't really talk about specific release dates. So, I'm under non-disclosure agreement, so I can't really discuss that, but, look for it coming pretty soon. So sooner than previous years. So that's about all I could say. Okay, so we just see, so from Rob, just asking, could you show how to create a macro that applies the process of silencing a portion of audio that has been selected with the range tool and assign the process to the / key? Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I just want to take like my range selection. So I don't even think, let's just say if we just put silence in. So really all you have to do is you don't even have to create a macro. We can we'll come here and I'll undo. So all you have to do to set that up to your back key is to go to your key commands. So we'll come right over here to key commands, and what we want to do is to go to, I think it's under maybe process. So we'll go to process, and then we'll just say silence. And then you could assign the key here. So let's say I just want it to be so we would assign that key command to the silence command. Now anything that's selected with the range tool, I come right over here and it'll just silence it. So you don't even have to do macro, just assign a particular keyboard shortcut to that function. So again, look under the key commands, go to process, and then you could just set up silence right there, and I'll just remove that particular key command. So hopefully I'll make it easy. Okay, so we see from Dallas LaRue, I believe he's in Las Vegas. My QSense won't open with Cubase 12, and what is the difference between save new version versus save or save as? Okay, so let's take a look why the QSense. So let's make sure that I'm going to come to my audio connections, and I'm going to go to my control room, and I have 2 cues, and I'll just add another cue available. So we have 3 different cues. So at this point, just make this all a little larger so we can see it better. Okay, so at this point, I want to go to a particular channel. So when I go to my cue sends, they seem to be active right there. So, you know, sometimes people may get into, so that seems to be working for me as expected. So make sure, one, that you have cue send, so it may not, it looks like it turns on even if there isn't a cue send right there. You know, also make sure that the cue sends aren't bypassed here with this little button. So if you see that yellow, that would mean that the cue sends are kind of bypassed. So you could just come right over there and choose to not bypass, but it looks like that kind of works fine. And as expected for me, let me know if that looks different, or if you see that yellow light, just make sure that you click there to unbypass the particular functions. All right, and so the second part of the question, what is the difference between save new version versus save or save as? So when we save, that's going to save the particular project with the same file name. When we do save as, we can take that project and it's going to prompt us to automatically save it, and the name field will pop up so that we could give it a new name. So we're going to save it as a different name. So as we do this, we can now type in that. Now, let's say this project is called Jump Off. If I do save new version, instead of having to type a different name or to overwrite the current project settings, when we do a save new version, that would automatically call it Jump Off 01 or Jump Off 02. So it would increment the number so that you don't have to physically type a new name in. So that way you could have a different folder or a different project file still within the same folder, but that way, you know, if you've done some experimenting and you're kind of going down a rabbit hole, you could hit save new version. Your original version will still be intact, and then as you do a new version, that would save all those settings, but just add like 01, 02, 03 automatically so that you didn't have to specify the particular name. All right, how do you import your saved macros from Cubase 11 to Cubase 12? You could manually copy it over, but you know, an easy way is to go to your profile manager and just come right over here and export your profile from Cubase 11 and import it into Cubase 12, and all of your key commands will automatically carry over. So. All right, so we see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us. And we see Jazz Dudes online, as well as Peter from, I believe he's in Montreal. All right, so we see Greg. Is there a setting in the question? Is there a setting in Cubase/Nuendo that would let me hear a sound while exporting mix in real-time format in Mixdown? All right, so when we go to our export audio Mixdown, so we'll just choose a real-time export, and then at that point, it should automatically be saved. So let me just come over here, and I'll just do a quick real-time export, and I'll just solo this one particular file. I think this is just going to be fed through the control room. And then we'll just have our new file automatically created. So as soon as you do a real-time export, it's automatically being routed through the control room for you. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, and we see Benny from Sweden. Thanks for joining us today. All right, and we have Chris in Jersey, UK. And my chat field just jumped on me, so bear with me a second. All right, so I think I'm in the neighborhood. All right, so you see Jazz Dude just mentioned he's got 2 PCs now running with Cubase 12. No issues so far. That's great. And we see Soren from Sweden. We have George checking in from Cape Breton in Nova Scotia. Thanks for joining us today. So I just see, hi Greg, in the big notepad, not the one on the inspector panel, is there a way to change the size and style of text? So I think it's going to be I think so if we come here to the project menu and let's go to the notepad, that as we kind of enter in, let's say our text, and I think on the Windows platform, someone mentioned to me once that if you hold down like Control and use a scroll wheel or Alt with it, they could do that, but it's kind of just a fixed size. But if you needed it to be larger, you know, one of the things that people miss often is just coming over here and just saying export notepad data. And then once you export the particular notepad, that it'll be just a text file. So if you wanted to, you know, then change it into any, you know, Word document or any text editor, you could change it there. All right, so I just see a question. Hi, Greg. My Nano Control fader controller is set to output CC to control my sample libraries. Can you let those CCs pass through MIDI remote so I can have CC as well as channel volume, CC control, etc.? So, you know, if those are, I believe, and I don't have a Nano Control, but I believe that once you kind of have something in the MIDI remote and it's kind of defined, that at that point you could just, you know, come, you know, as you're working here, you want those CCs, you know, I think that this will, if it's going to be used for the MIDI remote, that it's going to kind of block those from being utilized for MIDI CCs, because that would be like a really confusing scenario for it to write, you know, like let's say quick controls and write CCs simultaneously. I've seen a number of controllers that will allow you to kind of just hit a button and the 8 faders will switch to different controllers. So you could say, okay, I want this bank to be quick controls, I want this bank to be writing MIDI CCs, and I want this bank to do something else. So we often see different, so many controllers will have different kind of layers to switch between, but I think if you have it defined for CCs, that you may have to, you know, while you're doing that is maybe just to, when we go into the script here, you know, or let's say once we go into the script editor, that you could just choose to disable the controller script and then write CCs. And then when you wanted to use it for MIDI remote functions, I haven't really tested it, but I believe that's how it's going to work, but I could be mistaken. I could test it. I was trying to get a Korg Nano Control as well, but I guess they've been kind of sold out. So, all right, so we have Gerald Ely checking in from California. Thanks for joining us. And we have Ari checking in from Israel. Thanks for being a part of the community today. Okay, so we see question from Benny. New Verve, does it draw a lot of power? I have increased and reduced the buffer, but the sound hacks anyway. Can it be changed anywhere else? So I guess this is with the new Verve piano. So if we wanted to, let's say, add an instrument track, I'll just run it in Hallian Sonic SE. So when we kind of look at this, one of the things that you could do is obviously if you're running at a super low buffer, that will can make a difference. But if you're running it, obviously you're probably running it inside of a Steinberg program. You could choose to, preload more of the RAM into the particular instrument. It kind of does it at a conservative like 1.2 gigs. And also you could come over and have the player engine. So once you go into options, into global, like many people don't realize that you could have Hallian Sonic or Hallian spread across multiple cores quite effectively. So if you need to do that, you could try those things, and that should be able to kind of free up any CPU issues if you are running into some with Verve. All right, so we have Jason Sykes checking in from South Shields in England, and Razol checking in from Denmark. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, hi guys, some Cubase user who can help me please. Try to upgrade from Cubase 11 to Cubase 12, and when opening Cubase 11 again, I found this error process with the ID not found. Please, if anyone knows how to fix it, tell me. So one of the things that you could try that I've seen some people do is, make sure that you update it to the latest e-licenser software that you that you're running the latest version. And then if that doesn't work, that often fixes it. Like 95% of the time, I've seen people just literally unplug the USB e-licenser and plug it back in, and then it will get kind of resynced up. So give those two things a try. All right, so you just see I have a multi-track question. I have a multi-track song with a click. It varies in tempo at various sections. How can I force the whole track to follow the tempo of 108, including the click track? Thank you, Greg. Okay, so let me open up different project here with some varying tempo. I have a great demo, but I can't really show it on YouTube, unfortunately. But let me just open up a jazz piece here real quick. Okay, so let's say this has varying tempo. Okay, so we'll just kind of listen to the multi-track version of this. So I put on my click track. Click track has no correlation whatsoever. So what I want to do is just to do a tempo detection. So I'm just going to choose like my overhead drums here and go to my project menu, and we'll go to tempo detection. Okay, so that will give us a signature track. and a tempo track. Okay, so what I want to do, and try not to move my drum tracks around accidentally. Okay, so as we look at this, kind of just zoom in. So let's say, okay. Okay, so now I'm going to listen to the click. So we figured out what the tempo is of the file, and I want to just kind of find where the downbeat is here. So I'll just, right, so it's right here, and I'm just going to put in, that's where our 4/4 bar starts. All right, so now I want to select all of these particular tracks, and let's say they have varying tempo. And what I want to do is to assign these tempo fluctuations in the particular track to the files themselves. So we're going to come over here, select all the events, go to the audio menu, and let's go to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. So that's going to basically embed all of the tempo changes on every single beat in as metadata into the particular audio files. And we can do it at the project level or the track level. So at this point now that we have, so it's in your example, it'll just kind of find those particular tempo changes. I'll switch off the tempo map. So it's going to play back just a steady tempo. Let's say of 144. Or let's make it 176 or 120. So we can just, now it's just going to follow a steady tempo. Or we could have it just automatically follow the original tempo. So we could just deactivate the tempo map, and once we've found the tempo and applied the tempo values to the particular files, once again, go to audio, to advanced, and then we're going to set to definition from tempo. And then at that point, we can just, whatever tempo map we have, the different files will automatically follow. So it's a great feature, great functionality. All right, so we see Tim checking in from Mission Viejo. And we have Omar from France. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. I tried to open a Cubase 11 project in new Cubase 12, but it didn't work. It crashed. I had BFD drums on that project. Do you have an idea what's going on? So I'm not sure if BFD, if you're running it on, if you're running it on Mac, make sure that, I'm not sure if BFD has like a VST3 version, but if you're, and you don't indicate if you're running on Mac or PC, and it's always great as you ask questions. But you could try to open up the particular project without third-party plugins. So if you want to start your Cubase, if you hold down Alt-Control-Shift while you start, or hold down Control or Command-Option-Shift as you start, you could start the program without third-party plugins. You could do that. You could also try coming over here to import tracks from project, and if you wanted to import just that one BFD track from the particular project, you can come over here, and as we just say, okay, I want it to import just that one track and see if that is the culprit. So but if you're running it on an M1 Mac and you're running it into Apple Silicon native mode, and if it's not a VST3 plugin, it might be causing problems, and you may have to run in Rosetta mode if you're on Mac with an M1 processor. But I haven't had any problems importing any of my projects as well from previous versions. All right, and we have Tim checking in from Las Vegas. John Costigan wants everyone to press the like button, so that allows us to continue to do these particular live streams and have this wonderful resource. All right, so we have a question. Why would I use a sampler track versus Halion 6? Is there something the sampler track does that I couldn't do with a sample in Halion 6? So one of the things is, when you have this sampler track, so they're really kind of different intents. So, if I wanted to come over here to a sampler track, I could just right click and create a sample track. So a sample track is going to allow you to deal with one audio file, and then we could manipulate it. We could, slice it. But it's not intended to do, okay, I want to create a 32 velocity layer violin sample library with 100 different articulations. So as people need to manipulate different functions, you will actually see the sampler track as a subset of features of something like Halion 6. But there's a lot of people that don't have Halion 6 and need to have a quick, fast way of doing sound design and sampling. So this is going to be a subset of features and is included with Cubase, but Halion 6 is going to be sold separately, and that will have sidechain input where you could design VST instruments that combine samples plus synthesis together in kind of a hybrid format, and it's going to be a lot more involved if you're like a professional sound designer and you wanted to create instruments. You could look at like Chris St. Aubyn's Simple, or Danny Lux's like, Polycreate, Wave Create, those are, just customers that are now selling their own instruments that are Halion based, and you want to create Halion instruments. Halion's perfect for that. If you want to have one sample that you want to manipulate and you don't, and you just want to use tools that are included with Cubase, that's when the sampler track would probably make more sense. So they both play samples, but really kind of different intents with either one. All right, so we have a question from Steve Allen. Cubase 12 MIDI remote, are there switches, particularly pickup? So when we go to the MIDI remote, and let's say if I wanted to actually edit a particular parameter here, so let's say, we could choose like your MIDI note message, but let's say even if we're here to particular, we have pickups, scaled, jump. So we'll have kind of different modes here for takeover, and you could have it toggle. You could set different minimum values. So when you go into the mapping assistant for any function that you select, you could have it be pickup, scaled, or jump just directly there. So let me know if that helps, Steve. All right, so we have Camille checking in from the Czech Republic, saying great live stream, thanks. We're glad that you find it helpful. Make sure you hit the like button if you haven't done it. And we have Uno Memento from Finland, and we have Nick from Essex in the UK. All right, and we have Sense Zero from Spain. Thanks for joining. All right, and we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. All right, we have Marcos Castro just wishing everyone a happy Friday from San Jose, California. Miss going out to San Jose area. All right, so we see from the Monk Beat, I want to upgrade to Cubase 12 about the new MIDI controller setup system. We can import the XML files we have for the old system, or we have to remap everything. So there's no direct translation because the new MIDI remote mapping kind of does so much more capable It does so much more and has a lot more additional capabilities. But I think that once you start doing the, the XML files will still load, will still just load directly into your generic remote. But we'll see, I think, over time that the generic remote and the quick controls will all be kind of phased into this one particular function here. But, just to, it's literally just kind of hit a button that you want. And a lot of functions you could just, even, if you say, okay, I just want to come here and search and I want it to go to, my key commands, I could just come right over here and say, okay, when I go to my tool, I want to go to the audio tempo definition tool and apply the mapping. Or a lot of functions, you could just come over here and say, okay, I want to go to, I move this particular fader, and what do I want to apply to that fader? Let's say it's going to be the volume for this particular track. So I will come over here and just right click and I'll say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. And, we could do stuff like that. So assigning the parameters, if you're thinking it's going to be such a nightmare compared to like previous versions where it's like, oh, this is going to be awful to do because it was such a tedious process. Now you could just kind of come here, move the object, and for a lot of things, just right click and pick up for remote mapping and apply. And now that fader is assigned to that particular function if you wanted to. So there's all sorts. So, while you may like hesitate doing it, like I mapped 800 different parameters in an afternoon because, you don't have kind of the top and bottom and trying to scroll up and down to do that. You just kind of hit the parameter, hit the button that you want, and just assign the function very quickly. So it's much, much better process. All right, so we have Tommy Gomez checking in from Norway. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we see Gareth on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. Gareth is in Spain, in Bilbao, Spain. Okay, so we see from Diamond District Studios a question. I would like to switch from Pro Tools for my mixing work, including working on OMF files. Please demonstrate this in Cubase if possible. So really all you have to do if you wanted to, import and export OMF files. We also do AAF, which is probably, will carry over more information, but you could just import and export AMF and OMF files very easily between the two programs. It's kind of done with people all the time. I don't think I have an OMF or AF file on my system, but that's all you'd have to do. All right, we have Michael Pierce dropping in for an hour or so this evening. He's from a soggy southeast England. Glad you could join us. And we see Brian Sawyer checking in from Beulahville, North Carolina. All right. So it says, if I stick to Cubase 11, why be able, this question, if I stick to Cubase 11, why be able to reinstall Cubase 11 just like in the past? I've had to do several factory resets to this computer, and the dongle has been a savior. No activation hassle. So yeah, it'll, all you have to do is just reinstall it from the Steinberg download assistant and connect your dongle, and you're okay. And if you wanted to do factory resets, with the new system, you could just go into the Steinberg Activation Manager and deactivate, and then activate it again when you sign in. Okay, so we see from the Monk Beats question. I'd like to make a macro for open, close a plugin GUI on an insert on a selected track. I need macro command because I will use it on a Steinberg CMC pad controller. Is it possible? So I think that we could choose to, if you wanted to go to a particular track, we could create a project logical editor. So let's say if I just wanted it to come here, let's go to a project logical editor, and I'll just come over here and set up. So we can say I want to select, and let's say, tracks that have the name, let's say that contains hat. Okay, so now when I come here, we could come over there, so we could select the particular tracks. So I'm not sure if there's a key command way to navigate to different inserts. So let's see if we open up the edit command. Okay, so I don't think that there's a way to say go to insert number 2 or open plugin on a particular track. So, but let me just take a look. Okay. All right. Yeah, so I don't know of a way to let me see if I do this as a send effect. Okay, so let's see if that will select it. Yeah, so I don't know of a way to, within the macro, and I could play around with it more if you want to email me over the weekend to select, like we could go to the particular track and select like effects channels based on the name. But I don't know of a way to, if you have different macros, to have it navigate with keyboard shortcuts to go to different functions to select different plugins, but maybe someone else does. So, but email me and I'll take a look over the weekend, see if I could figure out something. But I'm inclined to say no. Sorry about that. All right, so we see Sven Isaacson just once again saying, Cubase 12 won't install unless you use OS X 10.15. So it's always good to check out the system requirements. All right, so we just see anybody in here have an M1 Mac that's running Cubase 12. Have you seen a huge difference in power? So I think, see Gerald Ely is just saying it's totally worth it. So I've seen other people online just saying that they're about a 35% performance increase, but there's a lot of plugins that aren't optimized for M1 as well. So, so depending on the plugins that you're using. All right, so we see the Monk Beats is smashed. He's number 44 on the like button, so thank you for that. That was about 36 minutes ago or so. Okay, my chat field jumped on me. Let me just... All right, so we see question. I got 11 Pro a month ago or so back and have now upgraded to 12. The spectral layers are installed, but it does not show up inside Cubase at all. Any take on that? So I'm not sure if you see it as an extension. So in 12, you could, so it generally doesn't show up as a plugin, so it's running through an ARA environment. So we could come over here, and once we have an event selected, so let's say I select this event, I go to my audio menu to extensions, and then we could load spectral layers from there. Or we could just see the extension, and then we could load spectral layers on the track level. So make sure that you're actually running it through the extension and not a plugin. So let me know if that helps. Okay, so we have Spike Williams sending greetings from a train to London. Have a good train ride. Gareth is saying Greg is an extremely hardworking man who has been tolerating our nonsense for years. I enjoy the live streams and the nonsense that comes with it. So, Jazz Dude's just saying he has the subjective feeling C12 runs smoother and faster than Cubase 11, and he's going to do some benchmarks to test it out. All right, so we have a question. How do you mute a MIDI event without unmuting all the other takes underneath that are muted? Okay, so let's go ahead. Let me just jump back to a different project here. Thank you for all the great questions. Okay, so I'll just duplicate this track a couple times. All right, so let's say I have these events on top of each other here. Okay, so let's say And before I do that, let me just give them different names. I'm just holding down Control so that the event gets the track name as I hit enter. Okay. And I'll make these slightly different colors so that they'll be more obvious. Okay, so let's say these events are muted. Okay, so let's say at this point, I just wanted to mute. So say if I go to the underlying events here. Okay. Let me just check to see if going mute, if all of them are now unmuted. Okay, so let's say if I mute this event. Okay, so all of them will get muted. All right. So probably the easiest way to do this might be to just look at the lanes. So let's say if we have these, okay, so let's say if these are all, okay, so once we have these, so if we come here to different lanes, and then, you know, I think that we could mute. So let's see if we just, when we're in lanes now, if we come here. So it could be that what you want to do is use the comp tool. And then, you know, as we kind of work here, we could just select your different parts. So instead of using the mute tool, because the mute tool will mute all the other different parts. But as you just wanted to open up the lanes, that you could now see the different takes kind of just laid out for us directly here, like so. So at that point, so give that a try and let me know if you kind of work, if you could do it in lanes and then use the comp tool, which looks like the hand, to mute the other events as one event is selected. All right, so we have Diamond District Studios and it's tuning in from Johannesburg in South Carolina, in South Africa. Not South Carolina, sorry about that. All right, so I just see just one comment. It says it's maybe a question, but I noticed as long as the record enable is engaged, it runs better than before. But as soon as you arm a track, the CPU performance goes through the roof. It doesn't seem to buffer or cut out. So one thing to be aware of with the new performance meter is, when we get to audio performance, that you have real-time performance and we have ASIO guard. So, if we have a lot of tracks that are record enabled, so if I just, have multiple tracks that are record enabled, we could see kind of the performance of what's going on for, tracks that are being buffered through ASIO guard and tracks that are monitor enabled. So it may not, check your peak meter here to see if that's adjusting, but just kind of be aware that you can now in the audio performance meter see what the performance being used is for real-time tracks that are monitored or record enabled versus tracks that are not record enabled or monitored. So we could have that distinction. That's different than what was in Cubase 11 and previous versions. All right. All right. So you just see, hi, Greg. Question. Cubase 12 is crashing every time I try to put a Nexus 3 VST and it works perfectly on Cubase 11. Is this just a temporary stability problem on 12? I hope it gets fixed soon. So, check to make sure, because sometimes when you go to a new version, if there's a VST2 and a VST3, when you go from like a 10 to 11 or 10.5 to 11 or 11 to 12, it may kind of rescan the plugins. So make sure that when you're doing it, if there's a VST2 or a VST3, that you're using the VST3 version as opposed to the VST2. But I haven't really heard of any issues with that, and I haven't run into it on any of my plugins as well. But make sure that you're running the same exact plugin. Sometimes you may filter out the VST2 versions in 11 and forgot about it because you did it once, and that may be what's showing up by default in Cubase 12 when it rescanned all of your plugins again. All right, so we see, does Quantize work on a chord track specifically for dragging audio to chord track and having it create chord symbols? So I think the Quantize doesn't work, but you could probably snap the events. So let's go take a look. So, since it's not necessarily a MIDI event, so let's say if I want this, let's just turn snap on. So I'll just hit the letter J. So let's say our snap is on. And now as I just kind of come here and erase that, let's see if we could just do that for multiply selected. So you could kind of just, if you have snap turned on, it looks like you could just have it automatically just kind of fall right on a downbeat as well. So try just enabling snap and moving one, and we just did that for multiple. All right, so we have music all day, checking in from Ypsilanti, Michigan. Can more than one audio interface be used in Cubase 12 is a question. So it's going to be kind of the same as before. So, if you have multiple interfaces, if they are designed to run multiple interfaces together, like I have AXR4 Ts, like the Thunderbolt interfaces, and they could stack as do PCI and FireWire interfaces. The problem with running multiple interfaces is there's no real way to resolve their clock. So obviously DAW programs like to be able to send the audio out and make sure that it's going to be in sync. But if the two interfaces are running different different buffers, and different latencies, there's no way for the program to deal with that, and USB audio interfaces don't have the ability to stack. There are some really crude workarounds available on the Mac OS. You can have an aggregate core audio device where you could stack, but that will, and some people on Windows will use ASIO for all, but those are just kind of pretty poor workarounds overall. And they don't necessarily, and again, the issue is if you want an interface, if you want to run more than, if you needed more IO options, is to get an interface that has expansion capabilities. So. All right, so we see Anti-Static just says just bought Cubase, bought 12 Pro. This weekend's going to be a steep learning curve for my first time with Cubase. Welcome to the family, and thanks for joining us for the live stream. And check out, a lot of the live streams. You have questions on particular things. There's lots of resources. And again, you can go to cubaseindex.com if you're just stuck on something in particular. And welcome to the family. All right, we have Tiago checking in from Brazil. All right, so we just see a question. Can you clip gain a slice in the sampler? I don't think so, but we'll go just to make sure. Just find something that. Okay, so. All right, so once it's here, if you wanted to do like the typical kind of clip gain, so I think that once that there isn't a clip gain on a particular slice, but let's say, so like maybe while it's not. Let's see if I adjust the volume. So it's going to do it for all. But, if you wanted to just drag this particular MIDI into the project, that now you could just take the particular MIDI event and put that to 0. But within this sample editor itself, it's not, it's not the audio editor, but you could obviously kind of drag it in, but it's not intended to do kind of like audio editing. But the slices, once you drag them in to be triggered in the MIDI domain, you could adjust to get different velocity values directly there. All right, and we have Prem watching from Holland. Thanks for joining us. Great to see Mark Rabin on the live stream. All right, and we have Captain Energy Music on as well from, I believe he's in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. All right, so you see a question. When I do an analyze tempo, I always end up with a 1/4 signature. So when you do an analyze tempo, it's figuring, basically it's doing the analysis of the beats. And we don't want to necessarily assume that every song is in 4/4. So it's breaking it down by beat, and then you could just manually add that in. So if you wanted to just say we're in 4/4, just place that in. But the detection analysis automatically kind of figures out the beat and then allows you to tell it where to go. Like I just had a project I was working on that was in 3/4, then switched to 4/4. So I wouldn't want the computer just looking at the audio file to try to guess what the beat was and where the meter change was. So that's why when you do it, it will place it in 1/4 because it's breaking it down by the beat, and at that point just simply change the meter as needed. All right, so we see Fred Solomon from Richmond. Great to see you. Glad you can make the live stream. Hope you're well. And Jeff Zabelski's back. All right. I think we missed you last hangout or two. And we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. All right, so we have Theodore who's joining us from Lagos in Nigeria. All right, so we see from Soren, the manual mentions a preference in event display, audio append clip name to event name, sort of. It's not implemented in Cubase 12 yet. I'm interested in that. Can you explain what it is? All right, so let me just take a look at it. Okay, so let's say I have this track here. I'll just call this Soren. I haven't looked at this preference yet, so let's see if we can figure it out. Okay, let me just... Okay, just seeing. Okay, so it says append clip name to event name. So I don't see the preference listed here, but I could take a look in the manual. So I haven't read the manual yet. It's kind of sounds bad, but I will. If you want to send me an email reminder, I'd be happy to do some more research on that, and we could show it on Tuesday's live stream. Okay, so you see question. With the new tools available within the chord track, is there a way to edit and change the chord information within polyphonic audio, i.e. making piano or guitar loops follow the chord track? So no, not at this point. The first intention was to, figure out what the chords were from the chord track. And for people who've watched a live stream for a long time, it's a very common and typical question we get. So maybe in the future we'll have more kind of polyphonic editing, but I think that every company that's done it, I haven't heard one that's kind of done it well yet. So. All right, and we see that Michael Teams has started his virtual ice cream gifts. Okay, so we see Greg, my Audition tool used to work on the huge AAF Pro Tools project in my new window, which is ominous. Had the composer stop by and the Audition tool stopped working. Stayed calm. Any suggestions? So if it's just going to be like this Audition tool, you may want to just, let's say if we're here, or if it's you're auditioning from there. But if let's say if we go to the audio connections, and let's say if I have, and this might be routed through the control room only. Let's test it. So let's say if we want to audition. So make sure that you have the control room activated. So when we come to your studio menu to audio connections, make sure that the control room is activated here. So if that's not activated, then the audition bus is not set up to route audio through. So give that a try. I know it could seem a little counterintuitive if you have it defined in the outputs, but let me know if that works for you, Jeff. And one other preference to be aware of if you have the control room set up is when we go to the preferences of Cubase. So let's say when we go to control room, that the preview, you'll see this preference here for use phones channel as preview channel. You can make sure that that is turned off there. And we see Nick is saying, don't have the composer stop by. So. All right. So we see question. Is there any way of getting the picture showing on the folder when importing third-party plugins, loops, MIDI files? Seems to be the ones I have purchased come with a picture in the folder. So when we come over here, let's say to our media, and we look at, different loops. So these are kind of like, Steinberg partner products that do this. I think it has to be kind of a Steinberg partner loop, and it's not set up where different third-party libraries, or you just could assign an icon to a particular folder of samples. So this is going to be kind of like a partner series feature. So, and I think it's a bit more involved than just a picture, like how that gets translated to multiple applications and all that type of stuff as well. So, but any of the official kind of Steinberg content partners, that's when you see those particular icons appear there. All right, so we just see question. Glad to see the streams are still going. I have a question about the Apple M1 chips. I'm wondering if you've any thoughts on how the M1 Max would handle projects with 100 plus VSTs in Cubase. I haven't really, since pandemic, I haven't had a chance to actually play with the M1 chips. I will probably maybe be getting one in 6 months or so when my computer lease is up. But it seems like, even now we could do that pretty easily with Intel chips. So if with, all of the different plugins, if they're going to be optimized for M1, I don't think you'd have a problem doing that, but it obviously depends on RAM, so if you're trying to squeeze, 100 plus sample based instruments and you have 16 gigabytes of RAM, then that would still be a bottleneck, even if the processor does handle RAM differently. So it could really depend on the instrument as well. All right, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you learned something new, make sure that you actually hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel. We see official Vex 1 just installed Cubase 12 and it's amazing. That's great. Thanks for sharing your impressions of it. All right, so we see a question in Cubase 12, can we deactivate old computer licenses without the old computer? So I believe that you could send a request to Steinberg and they would be able to deactivate licenses remotely if you don't have access to do it yourself on a particular computer. So I think that's going to be done through Steinberg as opposed to a user setting for that. Right, reading through comments. All right, so we see question. Is it possible to have Cubase refresh the connection to your control surface in MIDI remote? It seems that they occasionally lose connection. The only way to reestablish is to restart Cubase. So what I would try to do as I was in the MIDI remote, let's say I just wanted to work on this one, select this, try to, when you click on the settings here under the MIDI controller, you could try to disable the controller script and then enable it. And I think that will reestablish the communications with it. All right, so we see Michael Teams has gifted me 2 gallons of pistachio almond ice cream for my family and myself. Thank you so much. And thank you for the kind words. I'm glad that the Hangouts are enjoyable and educational for people. Okay, so we see question on licensing C12. Had my computer fried or was upgraded more than once, and with other internet licenses, I can just connect to the web and directly remove the license. Will there be a way in C12 to do so? So maybe this is a follow up to the question before. So I think that it would just be done via Steinberg, but I could confirm and just to make sure. But I believe that if you don't have access to the license, that and if you're at 3 licenses, that you could do that. If you've used all 3 of your activations, or you have 3 different activations to work with, that you could do that without having to involve contacting Steinberg. Okay. All right, so I see the soft keys for the Avid Control app don't show in Cubase 12. Any way to copy them from the previous version? So if it's just like, so I'm not sure if it's keyboard shortcuts. So if you want it to, come over, if it's keyboard shortcuts, you can copy the key commands file. You could export it there, or just come directly to your profile manager and export from the previous version and import to the new one. Or if it's going to be a generic remote, you can export the generic remote setup and import it into new versions. I'm not sure if it's generic remote or just key commands that have been triggered. Also see some more discussion on about the MIDI controller that's kind of sometimes loses connection. So yeah, we've seen a lot of times it could be just like an underpowered USB hub that can be causing that. Okay, so you see, Greg, can you move the stereo out fader in the mixer to the left? Project came in today with a template of 128 tracks, only using 25 at this time. So let's take a look. So let's say we come here. I'll add, let's say, a number of audio tracks. Okay, so I could select maybe all of these audio tracks here. And let's see if we go to our visibility tab and then we click on zones, that we take all these and move it to the right. So yeah, that's all you have to do. So you could move those to the right, or just simply take all those particular tracks there, and you could choose to hide those particular tracks if you wanted to as well. So if you select all the tracks that you don't have data, you could come over and, navigate it. So say I just have, tons of empty tracks, just come to come to visibility. And if you get to the track with all the selected tracks, you can now just hide. Or you could move the faders by going into zones and say, okay, I want my master output on the left zone. So you could do stuff like that as well. So you could either hide those particular tracks or move them to the right. Probably hiding them would make more sense if there's nothing there. Michael Teams is living up to his great reputation of dispersing virtual ice cream. All right, we have Dan Freeman checking in from Atlanta. And we see Reactor Records says we need more quick controls. 8 are not enough. But remember that, we can have, when we work with the quick controls, that, one of the things is if we have, particular plugins on a track. So let's say if I'm here, and let's say, okay, now I want it to go to, let's say the VST bass amp. Okay, so we could have quick controls that are kind of track based. So once we're here, let's say I'm on this particular track, we could choose to switch to focus. I had the same 8 quick controls, and now these quick controls are, controlling the track. But when I click on the plugin, now it controls the plugin. So if I just wanted to come here, we could switch kind of the focus so that we could just say, okay, now my plugin is selected. We could control plugin parameters, or so as I come over here, we could choose what is what a lot easier so that you can, use the same 8 quick controls. But, also any parameter, and one other thing to be aware of, let's say if I wanted to go to my mapping assistant for a particular plugin, and this is one of my favorite features of the controller, I say, okay, I want to take this slider, and if we go to mouse pointer AI knob, I could just move that slider and whatever I'm hovering over in the program. So if I open up this particular plugin, I just, say I go to my EQ and I'm here, any parameter that I hover over will just automatically move that particular parameter using kind of the AI knob. So I could have one control that could control, I'm operating my mouse in my left hand, that's why I look so incredibly uncoordinated here, and I'm right-handed. So whatever I hover over, I could just immediately control that particular parameter without doing any mapping or assigning. So the quick controls have been modified to make it more accessible and just kind of faster to access as well. So you may not need 8 in Cubase 12. And it's great to see you on the live stream again. All right, we have Tay, the bass walker from Atlanta as well. Okay, so we see from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, 200 plus tracks in Windows, some muted all times, full orchestration. Says FL tracks in a folder, flute tracks in a folder, etc. Some tracks in a folder need permanent mute. How to solo 2 different tracks without changing muted tracks. Okay, so all right, so let's say if I have different tracks that are muted. Okay, so let's say now I think let's say if we solo tracks, we could do that. So as soon as, like, if I solo a track just by clicking on S, and then unsolo it, the tracks that were muted will still stay muted. So we could just kind of, again, just as soon as I click here, those stay muted. Okay, so let's say I wanted to change another track. So as soon as I now unsolo those, those other tracks are, that were muted will stay muted just like that. So let me know if that works for you, Jeff. We see Gareth is very happy that Michael Teams is on. All right, and we see Tay is just saying about the Zoom Pro H4n today. I was impressed that it came with this software. So we're glad that you could join the live stream, and welcome to the live stream. We hope to see you on many more. I have a little Zoom portable recorder. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so it says I updated to Cubase Pro 12, and after the installation, the Cubase folders remained in the download folder. So, you know, I think on Mac OS, you have the option of taking the installation files, and often after installing, you'll be asked to, that you'll be asked if you wanted to remove the installers, but it really could depend. Like when you go to the Steinberg download assistant, if you wanted those to be in a different folder. So say we'll just come over here, but if you go to your settings folder here, you could change the download directory, but I think by default on Windows that it may not delete the download, the installation in the download folder, but on Mac you're asked to. Okay, so I see a question from Oren Bynum. Hi Greg, when I try to add a track, the record and monitor buttons don't always appear anymore, and when I try to save my projects, the don't save button doesn't always show up either. How can I fix? So if you come here, you will see like right here, you'll see like where it says standard. So we could have this set to simple, standard recording. So these will be kind of different presets. But if you don't see those particular buttons, it could be maybe that it's, it could be that it's too small and you may not see the buttons there depending on the track height. And you could also just right click on the track and you'll see track control settings. And now at this point, we could just come over here. If you don't see record enable at this point, I could just say, if you see monitor and record enable in hidden controls, that you could, select for the audio and say, okay, I want to take these two elements here and add those. And at that point, we could choose to include those particular ones. So, and the second part of the question, when I try to save projects, the don't save button doesn't always show up. How can I fix? All right, so let's see if we go to save. I probably just so when we do, so if you're doing save, it should automatically save. So I'm not sure if you want if you tell me why you want the don't save button, and maybe like when we close a project and there was changes. So let's say I did a bunch of changes in this project. This is when you might get the prompt, was when you close the project, but not when saving the project. So let me know if that is what you were looking for, Oren. All right, so we see Francesco M says, hello from Germany. How is it possible to create a sheets? It seems so complicated. So I'm not sure if it's just like sheet music, but let's say if I'm here and let me activate this project. And I'll revert it. Okay, so let's say, if you wanted to kind of start off with sheet music, so the first thing you want to do is realize that kind of the highest level will be like a part. So I'm going to come here, let's say I'm going to create an empty part. And then if I wanted to start creating sheet music, I would select that particular part. And we could think of this as a container of music. This is an event that's going to hold audio or MIDI data. So, and then what I want to do is just go to my score editor. And at this point, I can say, okay, let's just put in, I'll just do like quick notation stuff here. So and then if you wanted to, switch to chords. And different rhythms. So, if that's what you mean by sheets, again, just kind of start, create a part that's going to be for the number of measures you want, and then select the event on the project window. And then, and if you wanted to, just grab the pencil tool also, you could just grab the pencil tool to draw in a blank part. Or as you've recorded MIDI data in, it'll automatically create the part. So once you're there, then go to the score editor. And then if you want it to be a grand staff, you could just double click here. And if you go to main, you could just say, okay, I want this to be a split staff. And you could have your bass and treble clefs just like that. But if I'm misunderstanding, just let me know. All right, we see JVI just checking in, just thanking us for the fantastic hangouts. Glad that you can make it. All right, so we see, hi Greg, how can I put the media bay back to its default settings? Something has happened and it doesn't look like it used to look. I'm not able to use it correctly. So probably if it's looking differently, Oren, come over here and you'll see maybe like different, different like toolbars in the upper right-hand corner, and make sure and that will turn on and off the different, the different areas of the program. So you could see kind of all of your different folders, your VST instruments here, and your search options. So let me know if you have all of those activated, and that could explain, if not, that could explain kind of the difference in appearance. Volker says, give me back 24 with Atari, so Pro 24. All right, so we just see JVI is also asking, when I hook up MIDI controllers using the MIDI remote mapping assistant, the connection between the MIDI controllers and Cubase 12 is often lost. I saw someone else mention this earlier. Is this an issue? So I haven't had it lose, and generally, like in my studio, I have, let's see, I guess it's 3 or 4 different MIDI controllers. and they've all kind of worked as expected. But if you're noticing it, try going to the Open MIDI Manager. So it could be sometimes that different functions of the controller may be mapped in other parts of the program. But try to disable the controller script and enable. So, and again, to access this, when you go to the MIDI Remote Manager, just kind of click here to the right of your MIDI controller, and then you could just try the disable and enable and see if that helps. So we see Jeff Sabelski saying when the composer came by, he used Sonar and Acid to do his mixing. After he heard my Iconica Opus strings and the Grand asked for the Bosendorfer, I gave it to him. He'll be back. So that's great. All right, so we have Dom Composer checking in from Cambodia. And is it Amob from India? Thank you for joining us. You realize it's probably very late in the evening or very early in the morning, so. Okay, so we see question. When I type text into the score editor and press enter, the text moves backwards to the left, so it ends up wrong. Can I change something so that the text stays where I want it to be? All right, so let me just open up a project that's probably a little more musical. Okay, so let's say if we come to do text, all right, so it seems like, so I'm not sure if you're entering text in here, so if it's with text, I don't notice that is. So that seems to be kind of functioning. So let me know if you're accessing it from the symbol palette from other, and then if you're just kind of entering in the text there, we could just say, so when I grab my text symbol, I could just say, so that all seems to kind of stick where, until I move it wherever I want. So wherever I kind of type the text in. So let me know if you're entering it in from the text here and then just clicking to enter it into the position. Okay, so we see from Steve Allen, just says, I tried the audio to chords today, worked well. Do I smell chords to MIDI and poly very audio on the way? A la the Melodyne Studio I use. So I think it's a good transition step. So I haven't seen any developments past that, but I think it's a great step, and it's something that's very practical that a lot of users want it. So. But, I'm sure there's people that are staying up late working on things. All right, so we see Jeff Sabowski just saying about his question about not being able to kind of scrub or preview the audio. So it's Audition Bus control room settings. Thanks. Hope that's... Okay, so just see, how can we back up, restore a custom color palette? All right, so I think we just see if it's in the project color setup. So I think that generally, so we could save that to default, but I think generally, like, the color palette isn't saved as part. I haven't checked in Cubase 12, but the color palette is generally saved with the song. So even if you just have a particular song that you wanted to migrate the color palette to, you could just simply open the song, and then from the project menu, go to the project color setup, and once you have that, then at that point you could save the color set to the default. So, but just try just opening up a song. It doesn't have to have any data in it. All right, and we have Lawrence checking in from Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us. And we see Best Korean Jesus from San Diego. All right, we see Michael Pierce is going to dash for a while. Hopefully we'll catch him towards the end of the live stream. And we have FJ Segovia checking in from Madrid. So we see question, when will Nuendo 12 come out so I can upstage everyone that waited a light year for Cubase 12? So as we mentioned earlier, it should be, coming soon. So that's about all I could say. So, the team is hard at work on it and just getting everything right. And obviously Nuendo takes a little bit longer because there's more features. So it'll incorporate all the Cubase 12 functions as well as other new amazing things. All right, so we see a nice comment from Gareth. Just says, I just need to say, just over 2 years ago, I discovered Greg's wonderful group, and I'm so appreciative of all the wonderful people I've met here. Yeah, so I think we started kind of our pandemic when we kind of upped it. I think it was March 17th. So maybe we'll have to do some kind of special 2-year anniversary to count how many views and stuff we've had. But I think it's a wonderful group, and I'm just glad to be able to help people, and it's wonderful to be able to interact with people from all over the world. And I appreciate everyone for making it such a great community. Okay, so we have a question. When you do one click with selector tool on an event, do you have some latency when I click an event? A little lag exists to put the cursor. So, as soon as I click here, it doesn't seem like I have any latency on. So I haven't noticed that on my personal studio computer. It's on Windows or my work computer on Mac. So I'm kind of opposite a lot of people. But it seems all pretty instantaneous to me. Okay, so we just see, is Cubase Nuendo getting, is Cubase Nuendo getting the Dolby binaural monitoring built into the render in a future update, or would we still be required to use third order ambisonics with your own custom HRTF profile? So I can't really comment on particular new features in Nuendo. So you could probably figure out that it's going to have what we've seen in Cubase, but other than that, I can't really comment on features until it's released. All right, we have Steve checking in from Manchester, UK. Gareth has such nice comments. Just says, real life has crept back, but the pandemic has shown that sometimes from bad things, great things come. Massive thanks to the Hangout crew. So it's great. And we always appreciate all your witty comments as well, Gareth. So glad that you're still able to join us. Okay, so we see a question from Joe K. Do you know why I can't change the color of a track or group of tracks in the inspector? This seems periodic. Where it stops working, I have to go to the mix window to update colors one track at a time. So, so when we do it from the inspector here, this is only going to do it for one, like the top track. So this isn't designed to be, or maybe it's changed. No. So as we do this, it's only going to be kind of for the top selected track. So if you want it to change colors for multiple tracks at once, simply come here, select those, and go to the color tool and just say, now we can change the track colors all at once. Now, something else that could throw this off is if you have an event selected in addition to all these tracks. Sometimes you may have one event selected and that event changes, but not, if we look at this event, the event changes colors and not the track. So make sure that you kind of click in an empty space so that no event is selected, and then all the selected events can change. So now we'll select multiple events. I'll come over here and then we could change the color of all those that easily. So. All right, so we have Boom Zapot checking in from San Francisco. Thanks for joining us, being a part of the community today. All right, so we see just a question. Cubase doesn't require the dongle no more, but what about Wavelab and my other products that I have to go with Cubase, like Spectral Layers? So Spectral Layers works on a soft E license. So, if you could run it on soft E licenser without the USB dongle. Wavelab Pro will still be utilizing the USB dongle. So these will be migrating over time. And we know that, I've seen lots of comments online of, why didn't they just, change everything at once? It's because we didn't want to wait 3 years to do it for, one small, set of drum patterns. So it's going to be a gradual process. It is a huge development and technological change that has to go on to switch the licensing system. So over time, those will get updated as well. So. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to add to export queue different mix snapshots? So currently the two aren't really related to, to switch to this mixer snapshot with on an export one, switch to this snapshot on export two. Because usually when people are, since the snapshots are static and they don't take into account the automation, usually, the vast majority of time people will, when they're exporting, want to include automation. So, all right, we see Graham Witcher says his weekend mission is his upgrade to Cubase Pro 12. So sounds like a good weekend to me. All right, we see Gareth is signing off because he has to get up early tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. Will Cubase 12 work on Catalina? Notice it says Big Sur or Monterey. Thanks. So I've seen lots of people running it on Catalina and have been running it very happily on Catalina. So it may not be officially supported, or, which probably means that it hasn't gone through all the different quality assurance tests, but many people are running it on Catalina. So. Okay, so we have a question. What is the process to normalize a track or group of tracks to a specific dB? And is it destructive to the audio to do that? What's the faster way to gain stage your drums, guitar, bass? All right, so the fastest way, if we have tracks like that we want to do, and I'll just jump to a different project here. Okay, let me just open up an R1. If you wanted to export your tracks and process them to a specific dB range, all you have to do is select them, and you go to audio, and we can say processes and choose normalize. And then at this point, we could just say, okay, I want this to be at -6 dB or -5.99 dB, or let's just double click here. And we'll say -3 dB. So now as we do this, the process will, it'll process those particular files. Now, as it does this, the original file is always intact. So it has an edited file versus the original file. So 10 years later, if you wanted to just right click here, and we could just say, oh, let's just delete that one process, you're right back to where you were. Unless you specifically choose to freeze the edits. So at that point, it's, the original file is intact and always accessible to the program that fast. All right, so great to see Walter Blackledge on. So, Greg, hate to put you on the spot, but can you think of a drum kit in Groove Agent 5 that has a John Bonham when the levee breaks sound? Thanks. All right, so let's say I'll just do a generic one because a lot of that could be more processing. So let's say... Here's like a default kind of drum kit. So let's say we have... So let's see if we could do some processing on this. And let's and maybe the envelope shaper. So you can kind of often just kind of play around with some different processing. Obviously a lot of that sound was a Headley on a Grange. It was a particular room. So if you really wanted to kind of tweak, reverbs a lot, you could do that. But I would do reverb and maybe the envelope shaper. And that could kind of get you a long way there. And that's just kind of doing it globally. But if you kind of do it on each individual drum, you can kind of probably work your way there, Walter. Great to see you on the live stream. And that's just the Forget the Past. And some other kits that you might like, check out maybe the Marco Miniman kit is also quite nice. It's an add-on sale. All right, so we see Gerald just saying that score tip is a great one. Thanks, Greg. So we see, when is Dolby Atmos coming? So the first maintenance release that we'll see of Cubase will incorporate a couple of new features, including Dolby Atmos. So I would anticipate it maybe next month. All right, so we see question, if I deactivate the quick controls on the project window, then my fader knobs I set up in a remote MIDI controller still affect quick control values. Is this intended? So yeah, the quick controls can, have access to a number of different parameters. So even in the VST instrument, I could just click here, and then I could see the quick control parameters for an instrument, a plugin. So all these different values, we could just have quick control. So it's not necessarily just for like the track quick controls, but it could be for any plugin or just any function in Cubase. So if you turn this off here, if I'm understanding correct, the quick control settings will, still be available to use in other parts of the program. All right. So we see, where do you find the remote control scripts? Example for Native Instruments S88. Do you have to set it up yourself, or is it available somewhere? So I'm sure that now that the quick controls are activated, these will be floating around, available to download. So out of the box, we're not seeing the ones that we do see scripts for is when we come here. So we have Arturia, Novation, Akai and Korg controllers out of the box that will have scripts. Otherwise, the controllers will have to be, created. But I built one for my Nectar in, 5 minutes or so. So you could do it very easily. So, and then these will be available to download and share. And the intention is really that, and we've worked closely with a number of companies where they're creating their controller scripts already. We see Best Green Jesus, he's just reiterating. He says, I set up my own remote MIDI script since it wasn't included. It was really easy to do. So. Okay, so we see, can you explain how you work with the smart tool? Thanks. Okay, so usually when we talk about kind of smart tool, this is when we place this, you know, in I think 10 or 10.5, maybe 10.5, we combined the functions of the range selection and the object selection tool here. So if I have, you know, so, and these used to work independently. So I could have an object selection tool that would do stuff, and then I would have a range tool that would do stuff. But when we click here to make this orange color, we have both. So when I'm at top, it functions as a range selection tool. So I can just kind of say, okay, I want to take this range and move it out. Or if we come over, let me just, at that point, let's say, I'll undo that. So if I'm at the bottom, we could move the whole vent. So as we work with this, now there's lots of different, you know, functions that we could do. So if I wanted to just do a fade in or conversely a fade out, and in version 12, if we hold down Alt Control or Command plus Option, we could restrict the fade position just by doing that. If at the bottom, we could hold down the Alt or Option key and automatically split. And if we wanted to now just come here and adjust clip gain. So a lot of different controls where, okay, I wanted to, you know, take this event and have this event start here, or hold down Alt and Control and we could slip the audio within the event, go to the right edge and we could duplicate events. So, or just come right back and we could extend the start range or the ending range as well. So there's a lot of different functions that we could do just directly here using different modifiers and keyboard shortcuts to get a tremendous amount of audio editing done. So just come here, change your gain, etc. Okay, so we see, what about Dolby binaural monitoring? Is it coming to Cubase / Nuendo? I have Nuendo 11, which doesn't have it. So again, I can't comment on future features until it's released. So I'm sorry about that. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, is there a way to export your MIDI tracks in your project without Halion sonic sounds attached? So when we go to export a MIDI file, the MIDI file doesn't have the instrument attached to it. However, when you go to import a MIDI file, it can, by default, it will automatically assign the Halion sonic sounds to playback, like for general MIDI uses. But if we wanted to go to preferences, we could choose to come over here and export. When we go to our preferences to MIDI file, and then we could just say, you know, on import, we could just choose to import, you know, MIDI tracks, instrument tracks, as opposed to the Halion Sonic SE multi-timbral. So at that point, you know, so when you export, it's not assigned to any particular instrument, it's just MIDI data with the channel, but the, you know, standard MIDI file doesn't have the capability of determining which particular instrument plays it back. As you import, you could assign those, but it's not as part of the export process. Okay, so we see, oh, and is there a way to select and export single MIDI tracks instead of all of them at once? So I think if we have, I'll just open up a different project here. I think if you solo the particular MIDI track, that at that point we could just include that. Just open this to test. Okay, so I'm going to just solo this track, and now if we go to export MIDI file, okay, and we'll see if that does it. Yep. All right. So if you just solo a particular MIDI track, you could just that will be the only those tracks that are soloed will be included in the MIDI file export. So you see, hi Greg, Bo from Toronto here. Is there a way to open insert 1, 2, 3 for editing in the channel settings window? This is not in the new MIDI remote mapping assistant as was before. So I think it was in the particular, like in the generic remote had the option. So I'll just take a look. I think this may be one of the things that didn't make it in the initial release. I'll mention that. Yeah, I'll just do a quick search. So you might still have to use generic remote for that. Yeah, so I think that's still different, but I'll make sure to mention that to the team, see if they could get that added in on, especially it'd be nice on the selected track to be able to just go to the inserts there. So we do the EQ bands. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Can you show us the usage of MIDI gate and what it's used for? Okay, so let me just find something that's a little more apropos than of a project here. So okay, so let's say I wanted to create. All right, so I'll just take my guitar tracks here. Okay, so and now at this point, I wanted to go to my inserts here. So let's say I have all my guitars. And they're all going into this group. So, and on this group, I'm going to just put in a MIDI gate. All right, and I think that once we have this done, I'm going to add a MIDI track. And now we'll have, for our output, we'll choose our MIDI gate in. So now if I'm playing along and I play a MIDI note, so the guitar tracks will be hidden. So let's say if I want to do something even a little more creative, I want the guitar to come in when the kick drum is hit. So I'm going to select my kick drum track here, and I'll go to my hit points. In the sample editor, so we'll come right over here to our hit points, edit our hit points, and let's just kind of zoom in. Okay, and what I want to do is now create MIDI notes. All right, so I'm going to just place this. So now as we listen, all right, and I'm gonna put this into my MIDI. So now every time the kick hits, or if you want to do the opposite. So it just allows you to kind of open up a gate just when it sees a MIDI message that comes in. Just see some great discussion of Atmos and, you know, doing on headphone mix and how most of the multi-channel stuff just doesn't seem to translate down. So we see from Jarlith just saying, wow, 2 years, Greg, it's a great group to help everyone get more out of Cubase. Yeah, so I'm glad I could still kind of move into, you know, being relevant and helping people as people were home, and that the software really lends itself for this. Okay, so to see, can you copy panning from the audio track to its send? Let's say you send drums, kick, snare, tom, cymbals to a parallel bus, and we want to send the same panning. All right, so if we're doing like a parallel bus, so let's say, so I'm not sure why you would need to necessarily do the. So let me just take my. I'll just revert this quickly. Okay, so if we have panning set up, so let's say I'm going to add 2 groups here, and I'll make these stereo groups. So now what I want to do is to come here. Let's go to my sends, and I'm going to select all of my tracks. And now we'll just come here. Let's put this in absolute. Okay, so now we have our all right, so let's say we have our 2 groups here kind of in parallel. And I'll just come here, drop the compressor on. All right, so let's say if I wanted to come here and pan, let's say my snare. So now we'll have the snare pan to the left. So on that group, so since they're both being routed to a stereo group, I'm not sure if you need to copy the panning over, but if you could let me know if you actually need to copy the panning over. But if we have panning between it, so let's say I want to take my snare. All right, I'll just rewind here too. So at this point, we hear it panned in whatever channel in both groups. So we don't, everything's in the right channel, everything's in the left channel. So so let me know, if I'm misunderstanding, but the panning level, once it's being routed to the stereo group, the whatever panning should automatically be carried over, and you should hear it the same. So. Okay. All right. So we see a question. I have an Apollo Twin USB and want to connect outboard gear. Have you discussed that here? Calling in from Luxembourg. So I think if it's just a 2 in, 2 out interface, it's sometimes hard to integrate outboard gear because you would want to have additional inputs and outputs for the outboard gear. So when we go to your audio connections, we can go to like external effects. And here, we could say, okay, I have a finalizer or, whatever, my distressor, we'll call it. So, and now we would connect this to inputs and outputs of the audio interface. So that, so my guess is probably that the audio ins and outs are being used for speakers, and sometimes the headphone amp is tied directly to the main output. So, if you have a 4-in, 4-out interface, at that point you could use other inputs and outputs. So often it's not having the, if you're just mixing, not having outputs that go to the speakers and outputs that go to the device. So if it's just a 2-in, 2-out interface, it's probably more ideal to get, the ability to have like 4 outputs and 4 inputs. So, so that you can have 2 of the ins and outs for the external processing gear. But you would just come over here, and once that's defined, you come to your inserts, and then you'll see an external plugins, and you can say, oh, I just really want, my finalizer here. So, and then the signal goes out through the audio interface into the real world and then back. And then, you notice that we could come here and measure for the delay. So that will automatically compensate for the outboard gear. So, but, if you have it just a 2-in, 2-out interface, it's going to be really difficult to have external effects integration. Some people will mix through the hardware, take the audio outputs of their audio interface into like kind of a processor, and then you hear it. But then, you need to then take the outputs of that and then capture it back in as well, unless you're, exporting to like an old CD recorder or to a different computer or something. So, all right, so we see Joe K just saying, can you add a track from the mix window? Let's take a look. I usually just do it. So if you wanted to come here, we could add, group channels, VCA tracks from here. Or if you wanted to add an effects channel, we could do that. But you could always just kind of hit T and say, okay, I'm here, hit the letter T and say, okay, I want to add an audio channel, so you could do that from within the mix console window. So the letter T, like is in today. So, and then you could just open up the add track dialog box while you're in the mix console. All right, so we see question, is there a way to convert overlapping events into lanes without dragging them into the lane manually? Can this be achieved via macros and or project logical editor? Okay, so let's take a look. I'm not sure if it can, but we'll see if we can get something going on here. Okay, so let's say if I come here. Okay, so let's say if we have the event selected, okay, so let's see if we can. Okay, so I'm going to just say navigate down. Let's add that command. And then we'll go to edit, move to selected track. We'll see if this works. I think it's maybe under edit. Move events to selected track. We'll see if this. All right. All right, so just add a couple things here. All right, so let's see if we. All right, so it's going to move it to a track down. It's still the same track, so let's see if there's a function for lanes. Maybe we could do that. All right, let me just remove this. I'll just try this. Thanks for patience. right, let's see if we can just assign that to a particular key command. Oh, it was just my, yeah, so it looks like it was just triggering my macro. Let me just look one more time. Sorry for my confusion. Yes, I think it has to be manually done. Sorry about that, because it's if we move it to the next track, it'll move it down to here and not to the new lane. So you think it has to be manually done. Sorry about that. All right, so we're just saying, Joe K says, even the color tool doesn't work. I think this is in the mixer, so let's take a look. I go to the colors, so it seems to work for me in the mixer. So let me know. I just see the comment. So can you add track from the mix window? It says even the color tool doesn't work, so it seems like that's working. Okay, just reading through comments. See, JVI just says he also loves Verve. Just a piano is worth the upgrade. Okay, reading through comments. All right. Okay, so we see what question? What's the difference between normalize and pre-gain? Is one better than the other? Does Cubase have a trim plugin? So so when we have gain, that's going to affect the that's affecting the audio signal as opposed to affecting the audio file. So when we add gain, and if you want to see. So the pre-gain isn't a plugin, but what it is just if you go to the EQ, you could see the pre-gain right here, and you get an additional 48 dB of gain or cut. So it's not a plugin. So it's just part of the channel EQ. We have the pre-gain along with phase directly here. But when we have pre-gain, that will take the signal and increase the signal up, and that's modifying and adding gain or cutting gain to the signal as it's going through the mixer. Whereas normalizing is actually affecting the particular file. So if we wanted to look at normalizing audio, I could just come and let's say, okay, I have this file, and let's say, okay, we bring our clip gain down. So as we would normalize the particular file, what we would do is just come here, and let's say we'll do it on this file here. So when we look at the amplitude, I could now just go to audio to processes. And as we normalize, we can say, I want this file to be at -3 dB or at a particular LUFS level. So that's actually processing and adding gain and amplitude to the file as opposed to affecting, adding gain during the mix, like real-time mix process. So that's a difference between the pre-gain. So, and again, you don't need to have a trim plugin. It's just part of every mixer channel. Okay, so we see from Angel just saying, "Hi, Greg. How can I set a file on a vertical line in the grid for lining up other MIDI tracks to work in time?" All right, so let's say just jump to this project. So we have number of MIDI tracks. Okay, so let's say we have a marker. So I'm going to just go ahead and drop a marker track in here. Okay. Okay, so now we'll see these kind of vertical lines that are the marker track. So say these yellow lines. So now if we wanted to come here, let's say, let's see if we could snap to events. So let's see if we could. So we can see now that we can snap, once we set our grid here to events, we can now just take all of our MIDI notes here, our MIDI events here, and we have that marker, let's say our vertical line. And now we could just come right over here and have all of these snap to the markers. So we could just come right here and have it snap to the marker time. So that's all you have to do with that. So once you just choose instead of grid, so this will allow you to snap to musical grid points, but maybe not to the marker itself. So we'll just kind of zoom in. So we see this yellow line. Now that we set this to snap to events, it'll automatically snap to where the marker is. So that could be your vertical line. So let me know if that helps. All right. So I see just from Joe K says, sorry for all the dumb questions. What would you use in Cubase to replicate the head feature in Pro Tools? So I'm not sure what the head feature is, but if you want to tell me what it is, I'm sure there's probably an equivalent. So let me know what it is. I'd be happy to kind of show you if there's a similar functionality. So we see question, can we default the number of fixed insert slots to any number we want? So currently on the inspector, we see all 16. But when we go into the main mix console, so let's say if we're here, we have our inserts, we could choose, sorry for hitting my mic, but if we come here, okay, so when we go to this little drop-down menu icon here, We could have a fixed number of slots to see all 16, or we could have these, if we don't have that active, it'll show 1 plus the number of track of inserts that are on the particular one. So if I wanted to come here, we could just say, okay, I want the DJ EQ there. So now that we have something that's in insert slot 2, we'll have 3 insert slots. So it's kind of dynamic, but not where you say I need 7 inserts or 4 inserts. But on the main mix console, you could just come right over here and choose between the fixed number of slots, which will show all 16, or 1 plus the highest number insert slot visible. But that doesn't translate to the particular, that doesn't translate over to an audio track. Is still kind of fixed with 16 insert slots there in the inspector. So you see just a great comment from Lawrence says, when I saw the new focused quick control features, I picked up a Behringer X Touch Mini and have the 8 knobs as quick controls for plugins. So whatever has the focus is on my knobs. Very cool. So yeah, so you could have just, you could have kind of multiple sets of controllers with quick controls. One that's just for tracks, one that's just for plugins as well, and just kind of set accordingly. It's a great point, Lawrence. So we see a question, is it best practice to import from archive or import from project? Is there any pros or cons to each? They're really just kind of, I think they're basically doing the same thing. We used to have import track archives where people would, be able to import different tracks, different sections of projects, and be able to import and export them independently of the project. But then it's kind of migrated to the import tracks from project, and that would have, a lot more capability, plus the ability to, with the import from project, you have the ability to not import the media, but just the channel and the settings, or to exclude automation. So if you had like a perfect drum mix from one song where all the processing and EQs were perfect, but you didn't want to have the automation carry over, you could just import just the channel settings without the drum audio files and without the particular automation. So with the import from project, you have the ability to decouple automation and the audio files or MIDI information that you don't have from archives. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to use folder tracks as buses? So folder tracks we could think of as being more visual, but if you wanted to do that, there is an included macro that does that. So, but we could think of, again, the folder tracks as being, more visual for that. So let's activate this project. And let's go to, I'll just revert it quickly. And this is one of the included macros. I think it's been in there since 10. So I'll take all of these tracks out of a folder for now. So while the folder doesn't do it, it'll kind of get you to the, so let's say I have this, so, and we go to edit to macros, and we'll say, I think it's selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. So I'll just say, okay, let's add drums. So now we could just have our folder and group channel all created within the particular folder. So once again, go to your edit to macros, But folders are visual because at times you may want to have a chord track. You may want to have non-audio tracks within a folder track. It could be MIDI, it could be sampler tracks, it could be a video track within the folder. And since that isn't passing audio necessarily, they could still be in there, but you could just, again, select a track to new folder and add group channel, assign that to your keyboard shortcut, and then it'll just kind of put both of them in there at once. And we see Jazz Dude just mentioning, if you like the Cubase Q&A stream / hangout, please subscribe and hit the like button. So that enables us to continue to do these live streams. All right, so I just see from Best Screen Jesus, would you mind suggesting a bind MIDI remote preset to MIDI channels to the developers? That is my only request for MIDI preset channel management. So just so I understand, I just want to make sure. So if you have like 8 faders set up, you want to be able to have different controls when you're on MIDI channel 1. When you go to MIDI channel 2, those 8 knobs or faders or buttons could do different functions just when it. So you have the same kind of representation visually here, but when you switch channels, these could be like one physical layout could work with multiple MIDI channels. So if you could let me know, and you could send me an email as a confirmation if you want. Okay, so I see, hi, when using Groove Agent standalone, I can only see outputs 3 and 4, but in Cubase, I can see and choose from 24 available outputs. My configuration is Windows 10, Cubase 11 Pro, UR824. So let me open up Groove Agent standalone. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to load up Kit. All right, so if we have like an acoustic agent kit, we can come here and then we see all of our available outputs. So we have the 32 stereo outs that will be visible. Let me load up a beat agent kit. So now when I come over to edit and we select the main, here we can see all of our different buses here. So, so let me know if that's how you're doing it. So, instead of doing it from like the VST instrument rack, but it seems like they're all available here. All right, so we have Matthew just saying, hello all, been busy last month, but had to log in here to say I'm very content with Cubase 12. That's great. Thanks for letting us know. And he says phase coherent audio warp is just awesome. That's great. All right, so we see, hi Greg, now because there is no more rewire, I'm using MIDI clock to sync Cubase with Ableton, and there's a flam and latency. Is there another solution to sync as well? So instead of MIDI clock, which is never like the most stable sync, it's kind of for old drum machines, I would use MIDI timecode. So let's say if we wanted to come over here, so if they're both running on the same computer, I would open up the wrong window. Sorry about that, but let's come over here to our project synchronization setup, and we want to say, instead of MIDI clock, probably MIDI timecode, and send MIDI timecode over to that, and that would be more accurate. All right. So we just see question, is there a way to have a playlist for live performances? So we could do this probably using the arranger track. So let's say if I have different performances like this. So let's say I have song 1, song 2, song 3, 4, let's say, like our set kind of laid out for us. So what we could do now is add an arranger track. So we'll come right here, right click to add track, and I'm just going to add an arranger track. Okay, and we could relabel, if we just alter option, we could call it whatever song we want. All right, so we have our different songs. So now we could just double click and add our different songs in our set and just kind of play back. And then if you needed to, change the set list one night, all you have to do is we could have kind of all of our songs in our set laid out for us here. And then if you wanted to, just change the order of the songs, you could do that. And this will kind of play back in a non-linear fashion. So all you have to do now is, and you could store multiple arranger chains so that you could, just kind of start right here and have different, different ways of having your songs kind of all laid out in non-linear order. So we have lots of people do that. And then you could navigate via MIDI messages to, as we get to here, hit a foot switch, go to the next song and wait, or repeat different sections. So all sorts of great stuff you could do. right. Okay, so I just a comment from Joe K. It says, let's say I'm sending to FX and I want to keep the panning. So I'm not sure if this was related back to when we were doing the effects, the effects here. Let's see if it's still set up for our parallel group. So let me just... come back to this. So, even with effects, it's so, the effects panning isn't going to, when we're sending it to a group, all the panning, if it's a stereo group, is going to be automatically maintained when doing parallel processing. But if I'm misunderstanding or misremembering the context, Joe, just let me know. All right, so I just see from Joe's like your groups will now show the panning they were sending. So, if we have panning, so let's say if I have these going to my drum group and I'll send these to another one. So I'll just add another bus here. All right, so let me add a group channel. If you don't see the panning, it's still panning, but you may, depending on your settings. So I'll select all my drum tracks here, and then we're gonna set these to stereo out. And then again, we'll come here. We select all the tracks. All right, so let's say now we have our snare. I'll just deactivate my Q-Link. So we'll come back over here. So I'm going to just switch my meter. So as we would pan, and just set my meter type here. So, as you hear it, you can clearly hear it's in the left. So if we wanted to just, again, come here. So All right, so we see, hello, very interesting stream. Thanks. Do you have short info about Nuendo 12 release? So it will have all the Cubase features that we see in Cubase 12 plus new, plus we're going to have new functions, but they haven't been announced. All right, so just see when I have groups, channels, and effects nested in a folder, sometimes the folder solo mute doesn't work on one of the tracks inside. Any reason that might be? Like if you have effects, there's probably a good chance that your effects aren't being sent to the group, So if we had an effect send here, so let's say if we had like a reverb channel, so let's say if we come here, unless you specifically choose the effects channel to go out of the group output, then it may not slow because the effect is going outside, is not going into the group. The audio is going to the group, but at the same time, the audio is being sent to the effect send, and that effect send is often routed to the stereo out and not to the group. So that's probably why you're like some things may not be soloing as you expect because you didn't route the effect to be within that particular group, probably. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to prevent the bank of tracks to change every time I select a different track? So my bank of first 8 channels will always be the same. I'm using Launch Key 49 Mark II. Thank you. So I think if we choose your functions here, let's say if we're doing it in a new MIDI remote, that, we could, as we go to like the mapping manager, is maybe just on selected track. You could just have this, go directly, to the selected track of volume if you wanted to, or so I don't think it'll kind of go into the track folders, but you could literally just kind of, if you wanted to just do volume, just say, okay, I want this fader here. So let's say, we're in the mapping assistant. And instead of it kind of being like quick control based or something else, you could just, select the particular fader. And then this fader will now only do that particular volume. So we could just physically assign it. So as you navigate to different tracks, you could have these like quick controls may update, but if you wanted to just assign those to fixed tracks, you could do that as well very easily. All right, so we have a question. Can you move tracks around in the mix window? So generally most people tend to mix now in the lower zone mix editor. So we can't move in the mix console, but we could move directly in the project window. Most people, it's kind of in the same window for the most part. So. Okay, my chat jumped on me, so. Okay, so we see a question from Oren. Hi, Greg. I can play Flex Phaser, but I still don't know how to record an example into my project. Please show me how to record my example and change to another example in the same project. Okay, so I'll just do a new project here. right, so let me find. Okay, so let's say. Okay, so I'm just going to come here. Let's set the tempo scale here to 1/8 notes. Let's do 1/8 note triplets, make it a little more interesting. Okay, so if I have, these phrases here, what you could do is in the Flex Phraser itself, so click on Edit, and then you'll see this little record icon. So we want to click on Record. And then once you have that recorded, you'll see that this will be saved as phrase 1. And then really all you have to do is just drag that to your timeline. And now when we look at the data, it will just automatically include everything that we just had right there. So that was our arpeggiation. So you kind of recorded internally and then dragged the little MIDI icon to the project window. And then you could just switch a different flex phrase and drag that over. All right, great to see Michael Pierce back. Okay, so we see question. So is using pre-gain the same as using the volume fader when gain staging? No. So the pre-gain is going to give gain before the fader. So they both increase and decrease volume, but many people will choose to whack up the pre-gain and like get a compressor, and get a lot of gain going into the compressor. So it's you can get like a more colored process sound. But it's going to be kind of independent. So it's before it hits the channel. That's why it's called pre-gain. So. We see Bo from Canada. I've noticed that many third-party plugins offer oversampling. I've noticed that Cubase 12 doesn't use oversampling in plugins like the new Razor VST. Would oversampling benefit Cubase? What we do, I'm not sure if all plugins use oversampling or not, but a lot of it could be to get around deficiencies in audio engines of some programs that were historically fixed point. But when we go to our studio setup, we could actually have everything in 64-bit floating point. So that probably has more precision and more benefit of that than utilizing oversampling. So. All right, so I see a question. How can I loop an audio event so that I can have an event at the beginning of the song, and every time I change in this, everything I change in this event will also affect the loop events in the song? All right, so what you need to do is to say if we have a loop, and this could work a little differently for audio versus MIDI. So say I have a loop here. All right, so I'm going to hit, I think it's Command or Control K. And then we have what we call shared copies. So now if I do edits on this one, it could be applied to the shared copies. So just Control or Command K, and that will be the repeat events, and then check shared copies. Okay, so we see, hello, quick question to which I've never found an answer. Is there a way to route multiple tracks at the same time? Yes, so let's come over here. Let's say I will add a number of audio tracks. And let's say I want to create a new output bus. So I want these to go to stereo out 2. So I'm going to select all of my audio tracks here. And then hold down Alt or Option plus Shift and say change 1 to stereo out 2. And now all of the tracks, as we go up and down, we notice that the outputs here are all routed to stereo out 2. So just hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. And for all the selected events, you could do that. And so that's all you have to do. And if you wanted to sequentially add inputs or outputs, you could just hold down Shift by itself. All right, so you see, so it's heat as opposed to head, adds analog color to systems. It's applied to all active audio tracks in your session and emulating analog tape. So to do that, Steinberg was the first company to offer this in 1995, I think. But if you go to your channel strip, you can just go to your saturation and just open up the magneto, and you can have analog tape saturation on every single channel. And you could also run that as insert plugins. So you could just come right over there and just use magneto instead. It'll get you to the same ending there. Okay, I see second question. Is there a way to do internal routing again, like in Pro Tools? So, if you wanted to, take an audio file or let's say a VST instrument, I'll just jump here. So I'm not sure what type of internal routing, but, I'll show you an example. So there's a couple different ways to do this. So let's say I wanted to we'll have let me just open up my instrument. All right, and I'll just okay, so at this point, if I have this being routed to I'm going to add a group track. We'll make it a stereo group. All right, and I'll just add a group channel to the selected track, make it a little easier. All right, so now I see my drum outputs going to my group. I'm going to add an audio track. And then for its input, I want to say group 2. So I'm going to add that track. And now all I have to do is I'll just solo these tracks here and hit record. So I could now record the audio output of that particular instrument. And if I wanted to go to the MIDI track here, sorry, I got a little. So that's how all you have to do is just kind of record directly there. And if I wanted to take the MIDI like from Groove Agent here. I could just say Groove Agent is my MIDI input. So I can record both audio and MIDI simultaneously. So as we do this, we'll just say play. And I'll arm this track here for record. So that's kind of all you had to do is, so you could route it to a group and take that group as an audio channel input directly into Cubase. So let me know if that's what you mean by internal routing. Okay, so we see, hey Greg, how do I use a sidechain to trigger a Groove Agent hi-hat pad? So do you need to use a sidechain for it? Or let's say if we're just kind of playing along, if you wanted to trigger the, you could trigger the, the hi-hat, but let me just, all right, so let's say if I want the hi-hat here, I could route my hi-hat to its own output. So let's say I'll come here. Let's go to the agent. So we'll say our hi-hat is going out of output 3. And then output 3 in the mixer for Groove Agent. So we'll just come here. Here's our hi-hat on. So we see my hi-hat here. And then all I would have to do is to activate the sidechain on this particular channel. So let's say if we go to our channel here, so if we go to our compressor, we could now activate the sidechain and just, and then you could sidechain directly into the hi-hat. So you just see a question, which edition of Cubase would you recommend for someone who just wants to record, mix, and master finger-style guitar? You could start off and definitely do that with Elements if you wanted to start off and see if that will meet all of your needs. As you wanted to do more advanced editing, you may want to get into like ARA functions. Like if you need to take out especially like finger-style guitar, you may want to take out squeaks. And having ARA too, and I think that's introduced, I'm not sure if that's only in Pro, but you could check to see if ARA 2 extensions is an artist. But if you use a tool like Spectral Layers through ARA 2, you could just do editing of just the squeaks of guitars. So if you want to get really precise with it, there's more editing capabilities. But just for kind of capturing, Cubase Elements would work for that. So. Okay, just reading through comments. All right, now we have homemade sausages being distributed virtually. So what a great group. Okay, so I'm going to just go to some of our questions that were mailed in really quick. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Again, if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed already. Okay, so you see, Greg, in Cubase, I work in 24-bit 48K and usually export completed projects to 16-bit 44.1K. The float stuff is baffling to me. I would love to know if and when I should consider using it. In the next Hangout, could you please explain 16-bit, 24-bit, 32-bit float, and 64-bit float and the advantages and disadvantages of each? All right, so most people, when we think of digital audio, most people's first introduction was a compact disc, and that was a 16-bit 44.1 resolution. And that was to get enough information so they could fit, I think Sony could fit Beethoven's Ninth Symphony on a disc to get just like that amount of information on at that file size. So over time, 16-bit converters, when CDs were introduced, were, very high end. And over time, they've migrated to 24-bit converters. And 24-bit allows you to capture more information. So it's a lot more information to capture. And it's a pretty significant audio quality difference. If you record something at 16-bit versus 24-bit, it's pretty apparent. Now, when we get into floating point, the audio engine that we have in Cubase is based on floating point. It's always been that way. And other companies have, since migrated their engines because it's just kind of a better mousetrap. So if we have captured 24-bit audio and we want to now start adding different effects processing, such as I wanted to add the EQs. So I wanted to come over here and have my magneto. I wanted to have my vintage compressor. I wanted to have a de-esser or an envelope shaper. I could just come right over here. And when we process 24-bit audio, and then we're adding more information through the mix bus, and through processing, and we were still doing everything at 24-bit, you can almost think of it as like, let's say you go on vacation and you have a fully packed suitcase. Let's say that's your audio recording. And then you buy a bunch more stuff. So either, but your suitcase was fully packed and you had to get all the new purchases in your suitcase to go home that you just bought. So what you'd have to do is either compress the contents of the original contents of your suitcase, aka your audio, or you throw bits away to accommodate that. So to have the full 24-bit, resolution of the audio file and to add more information with plugins and instruments and effects, that's when we go to 32-bit floating point so that we could accommodate that. Now, as Steinberg a few years ago about 2 years ago, introduced the AXR4 interface and our URC interfaces, and those offer 32-bit integer converters. So this will actually record in 32-bit resolution as opposed to 24-bit. So with that, if we're capturing a 32-bit word, we need to have a higher resolution for processing the audio than what the actual audio was captured at. And that's why we have 64-bit floating point. Now, the difference between 32-bit and 64-bit floating point can be subtle. Some people, if you have golden ears, can hear it immediately. And it could, if you're doing like an EDM track, you may not notice it. If you're doing like a hardcore hip hop track, you may not notice it. If you were like Gary Pachosa and you're doing Alison Krauss type of projects where it's crystal clean, clear, Americana acoustic, with very subtle reverb tails, that's when you could really kind of hear those differences. So it could be, dependent on the material. My advice is, to always have, if you're doing everything, if you have 24-bit converters, you can capture it at 32-bit floating point and 64-bit floating point and just save your export audio mixdown at the highest resolution. And then you could also do other mixdowns at lower resolutions for CD. So that would be my approach to it. But I would always maintain the highest possible resolution to have that as a file, So I know so many people spend months working on their project and their final mix down is an MP3. And they've lost so much of the audio quality just by not having a full resolution master. So, if you have the option, export a 64-bit floating point file at 32-bit, or if you have the converters, or export, the highest resolution file possible. And then, you'll always have that, and you won't have to go back and, later try to remix it or re-export it because, you didn't make a good decision and just only exporting a 16-bit 44.1. All right, so we had a question. Is it possible to undock the meter at the end of the mix console and leave it open? So when we see like this meter that shows up here, or if we see the meter in our master section, we can see this meter. So the question was how to undock that. So if you actually go to your studio menu and we go to enable the control room. So now that we have the control room, we can just click on the meter tab, and as you play, it will just automatically be able to, so say we'll just play this back a little bit. So we will see that the meters can be floating anywhere and place it anywhere that you want on your project. So just open up the control room. Okay, so we had a question, how to trigger a logical editor preset using the generic remote. Okay, so I'm gonna come over here and we could do this, and this is very easy with the new MIDI remote system. But if we wanted to go to our generic remote, what we could do is say, I want to capture a MIDI note message. So I'm going to just say, this is coming in from my Panorama, my Nectar controller. All right, so what I want to do is just click on MIDI Learn. So I can just come right over here and I just can capture that particular MIDI note message. So let's say, okay, so I'll do note 85. And then what I want to do is go to Command, and then we'll choose Process Logical Preset. Any preset that you've done will automatically be able to be recalled through here. So let's say, okay, I wanted to add ninths to chords, and that's my, project logical editor. Or let's say I wanted to come here. We could say copy up 1 octave. So now when I wanted to go to particular MIDI notes, so we could hit apply and okay. So if I did this all correctly, let's say we'll look at this in our key editor. And then I could just, copy notes. And so once again, in the generic remote, we could just come directly here, set up what MIDI condition you want for that to actually be doing it. And then under device, choose command. Then channel category, you want to process logical editor. And then under value action, you select the preset. Okay, so I just see also I installed Cubase, upgraded to 12 from 11, and I'm having freezes crashing when attempting to create a custom plugin list in Plugin Manager. Some plugins all worked just fine in 11's Plugin Manager, nothing blocked listed. The plugins all work in 12, just not in the version 12 plugin manager, mostly Steinberg and Waves, plus a few tried and true third party, but nothing janky. So, often when, you get a new version, Cubase will go through and find a particular function here. So let's say we go to our VST plugin manager. One is to, it could be that the plugins that you're creating will automatically might be showing VST2 plugins or 32-bit plugins. So that, some of those may show up. So make sure that you're actually running all the VST3 versions of the plugins if you have them, because sometimes some plugin companies will just come over and just allow you to install. It will just automatically install everything that you need. But if I just wanted to come and let's create a new plugin chain, I'll just come here and we could just add these freely. Let me just open up the window again. Sorry about that. But, as we just drag and drop, I haven't had any problems with any of mine kind of transferring over or putting them into new folders as well. So you could just kind of come and place it right there. But make sure that, when you look at the VST version, that you have, that you don't have multiple versions of the particular plugins as you're working with it. All right, and we also, I think it's in JVI, he'd sent a question about some of his content not showing up in, like some of the, I think, Groove Agent content not showing up in his, getting content messages, like for an Alan Morgan preset. So it could be, let's go ahead and take a look. I'll open up my Steinberg download assistant. All right, let's just cancel that out. But all right, so when we come here, so make sure one that you go to the VST sound update. So make sure that when you come here, there is a VST sound update for all of that. So make sure that you do that. But while you may see some of the, like, you may think, oh, I have Patch Up, I have Groove Agent, I have some of this content already. So some of these will just, need to be updated as well. So I think some of the ones that you had will just kind of be done with this VST sound update. All right, so I'm going to jump back to our questions on stream. Thanks again to everyone for all the wonderful questions. Again, if you learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the channel. And we do this every Tuesday and Friday, unless otherwise noted. Okay, so I see just a question, how to make a harmonic voice. So I'm not sure if it's harmonic or harmony voice. I'll assume it's harmony voice. But let's say I'll jump to a different project here. So, once we have the chord track, so I'm going to just generate the chord track, and we can do this now from audio as well. So I will just come directly to my chord track, and I'll say, let's create chord symbols. Okay, so we've created chord symbols from the events. So if we wanted to, I'm going to select a region to make chords. And then I'll go to my audio menu. And we'll say generate harmony voices. So that's all you have to do. So you need the chord track in there, so you can put the chord track in manually, or extract it from an audio or MIDI part, and then go to your audio menu and say generate harmony voices. So, but if it is harmonic voices, let me know if I misunderstood. See Paul Daly saying Cubase 12 is great. Remote Manager changed my life and desktop. So it's great. We see haven't updated. What is the most important feature of 12 for creating new music? So really depending on your workflow. So if you're doing like EDM type work, it could be the FX modulator. The remote control I think is pretty universal for everyone. That it'll just kind of make accessing, most people have a MIDI remote controller. It's being underutilized on their desk. So being able to do that and work faster, I think is a great new function in version 12. If you watch the live stream from last Friday on March 4th, we did kind of almost a 2-hour walkthrough of all the new features, and it's kind of, pinned. I think audio warping, if you do like, on the project window is huge. Being able to use Scale Assistant in a Very Audio editor. So lots of great new features in there that people have been asking for. Okay, so we see, let me just find Jeff's question here. All right, just a real quick question. How do I save all my preferences and personal shortcuts from version 11 so I don't lose them when I download Cubase 12? The vast majority of times it's going to automatically carry those over, but you could go to your edit menu and go to Profile Manager and choose to export from 11 and import it into 12. Most of the time it's going to automatically carry over. Okay, so I just see just a quick question. Hey, Greg, I just, as you suggested, MTC, and I got the same flam. So, are you running the same audio, and this is with synchronizing, are you running the same audio interface between the two programs? If you're running different audio interfaces between the two programs, you may need to actually have have the word clock connected out of one interface to the other interface and have one be the slave. Okay, so I see from Jeff Sabelsky, Greg, at times using VCAs which don't have mute solo on track unless the inspector is open. Sometimes I want to solo 2 different VCAs on a large project. The best workflow for that. So let's take a look. Thanks for all the great questions again. So let me just revert this quickly. Okay, so I'm going to take my drums and let's send these all to VCA. And I'll take my bass and guitars and send those to VCA. Okay, so now as we're playing, so there's let's listen to my drums. Okay, so let's see. So just so at times which don't have mute and solo on a track unless the inspector is open. So make sure that when you're in the VCA folder, make sure, because you should see the, like here mine is on the mute and solo. So maybe it's in your track control settings. If we go to VCA, maybe you don't have like all the parameters for the particular VCA, but it looks like it all is kind of showing up for me directly there on the track, just to the left. So we go to the VCA fader, I could solo there or solo in the mixer without issue. All right, just all right, so we just see, hi Greg, I want to know how to configure the jog wheel in MIDI remote. Thanks. So a lot of times when we're dealing with the MIDI remote, people think when they have an encoder that it's going to, that if you have a knob on your box that you could treat it as a jog wheel. But many times that controller is only transmitting one particular value. So it's just transmitting, that it's this particular controller going up or going down, but it's not really suited for a particular jog wheel. So, a lot of controllers like the CC121 from Steinberg will have a dedicated jog wheel, and that's set to work kind of bi-directional and at different rates. But most knobs that just transmit standard MIDI CCs don't really do that. So it can be difficult to get that. You would need to have multiple functions on that particular knob to be able to do that. And a lot of knobs in MIDI controllers don't offer that. See how we're doing on time. So I see we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. And if you have questions you want to email in advance, you can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We will be doing this again at Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, so the same time as today. And we look forward to seeing all the new faces on next week's live streams. And everyone have a wonderful weekend. And everyone, please stay safe and healthy. Take care. Goodbye.